vivendo a sexta extinção em massa. 50% da vida selvagem da Terra desapareceu nos últimos 50 anos. E entre o aquecimento global e essa grande extinção, se nada for feito, o planeta pode se tornar inabitável nos próximos 50 anos. Foi pensando nisso que o diretor francês Cyril Dion decidiu realizar Animal, ou Animal. Mais que revelar os problemas, o cineasta também quer mostrar como nós humanos somos parte deste mundo e como estamos profundamente ligados a todas as espécies vivas. E para fazer essa jornada, ele escalou Bella e Vipulan, dois adolescentes que, apesar de já terem conhecimento bastante sobre as grandes questões socioambientais contemporâneas, também têm olhos curiosos para descobrir as belezas do nosso planeta. Nessa viagem por vários continentes, eles conhecem quem tem criado soluções. E talvez mais importante do que tudo, também são estimulados a imaginar uma nova era, um novo mundo, em que o objetivo maior não será o crescimento econômico ou o consumo, mas sim proteger a vida na Terra. Cyril Dion conversou conosco sobre Animal e começou contando como nasceu essa ideia de fazer esse importante alerta sobre a extinção em massa.
I just have the feeling right now that when you're talking about the ecological crisis, you just summarized the crisis by talking about climate change. And that's not the only issue we are facing. I mean, mass extinction is as bad as climate change. And we are not, since we are living in cities, I mean, many people are living in cities right now, we just don't see it in our day-to-day life. We don't see species disappearing. And to me, addressing this problem is also a way to address the root of the ecological crisis, which is our relationship to the living world. We've been assuming that, human beings and nature are separated, and we are not. And since we see the world like that, we see the world like there is human beings and there is nature, like everything that is not human being, we call that nature. We've been exploiting the natural world, presuming that we can, we could cut forests and empty the oceans as much as we can, as we want, and just to create economical growth. And at some point, it doesn't work anymore because the balance in the ecosystems are in danger right now. So there is one, balance about climate, but there is also many other balances in the health of the soil, in the oceans, in the forests. And so thinking about that and thinking that we are part of something that is bigger than us, something that we belong to, is to me the first question that we need to address when we want to solve the ecological crisis.
But Bella and Vipulan, they're already really, active in the struggle for the earth, isn't it? Like they're very, well informed and articulated. I really like, the way they also face the powerful people, isn't it? Like that sequence, they are trying to interview the powerful guy. And it's so symbolic, isn't it?
And I wanted them to be like that. I didn't want to take two teenagers who didn't know anything about, climate change and so on. I wanted to take some activists who are already trying to change the world, to challenge their strategy. That's pretty much one of the first things I asked them. I mean, what do you want to achieve? You're going on strike every week, and it's kind of, not working at all. So where do you want to go? Do you want to keep doing that for the next, few months? Or do you think there is another strategy to pursue? And the starting point of the journey in the movie is that we need to find another strategy. And being like that, it was easier for them to confront all the people that we were meeting, and not only to listen, because if they would have been, ignorant on the subjects, they would have, believed everything that the adults were saying. And that was not the case, and that was a lot more interesting to confront all those people, to go a little bit further.
Do you feel this film, that Animal, works in a way with adults or teenagers and children? How the audience is like feeling the film so far?
From what I've seen, it works on both, audience. Many teenagers just identify themselves to Bella and Bipulan, and that's really strong. And they're at some point of their life where they're searching for a meaning and for meaningful things to do. So it's really strong for them. Most of the time they're really moved and they're full of passion at the end of the screening, and they want to do many things. And the adults are more like overwhelmed, because most adults who have children see Bella and Bipulan like they are their own children, and it's like heartbreaking for them to see that they're in a world that is such a mess. And that's really interesting to see that most people are aware that there is an ecological problem, but they're not really aware of the gravity of the problem, of how bad it is. And the first part, the first, 20-30 minutes of the movie are kind of really strong. So many people are like, wow, I didn't know it was that terrible. And we're like, yeah, actually, more plastic than fish in the ocean, maybe in 2050, 1 million species are at risk to disappear. And it's bad. It's quite bad.
But this is a more philosophical question. It's not even a question, but in order to change everything, we have to change our way of life. And we have been taught to build our life in consuming, like industrial growth. We think about growing in economics, but there's a limit. That should be, isn't it? Like, we need to reinvent ourselves. And this is the biggest challenge, isn't it? Like, we still didn't discuss a new way of life, isn't it? Like, properly, you know what I mean? Like, properly, the powerful people, the people who rule the world,
And that's exactly the point. And that is one of the things that we're trying to show in the movie, is that you cannot ask people to change if the structures of the society don't change at all. Because most of our behaviors are just oriented by the structures of society. I mean, if you have, for example, to take your car to go to work, it's because, the cities where you're living have been built like that. And because you don't have, enough transportation systems that would allow to not taking your car. And you can't help it. I mean, it's the government who needs to do something, or the big companies. So what we need to do is to push for political changes and also for cultural changes. I mean, what you were mentioning about growth is the narrative in which we are living right now. We are living in a narrative saying we need more and more growth, like infinite growth. And there is a sequence in the movie where we're talking with this guy who was teaching in Stanford University and in Sciences Po in Paris. And he's just saying, when we're looking at the consequences of growth, we're just assuming that if we have growth, we are going to have everything we want: education, great health systems, and prosperity, and so on. And that is not really the case anymore. If you look at the US, for example, you have like 3 or 4% of economical growth. And despite of that, people are dying sooner, and the ecosystems are getting so degraded that at some point it's going to be difficult to live in those areas. For example, in some areas in California, and the inequalities are growing, and people are more and more confronted to the fact that the institutions are weak and the democracy is getting weaker and weaker. So maybe it's not the good indicator anymore. And maybe we need to think about what we want to achieve as a society. And we don't want to achieve growth. I mean, it's not an objective in itself. What we want to achieve is to be in good health, to have a great relationship with the people that we love, to be able to, you know, to eat, to have clean water, to have clean air. And so how do we do that? Do we do that with economical growth, or do we do that by organizing society differently? And what kind of narrative do we need to invent to achieve those kind of goals? And that's a huge philosophical change that we need to consider right now. It's not only technical changes. I mean, it's not only because we are going to switch from, you know, the cars that we have right now to electric cars that we are going to solve the problem. Not at all. We need to reinvent our relationship with the living world, to reinvent our economical systems, and in a way, it's a greater challenge that only, you know, building wind turbines, and we need just to realize what kind of impact the things we're buying have on the world and on people actually. Who are the people who are, you know, making our clothes? Who are the people who are raising, you know, those cattle that is going to become meat? And who are the farmers, and how are they working? And if they use pesticide, what kind of impact does it have on the water, on the insects? And that's pretty much the issue we're trying to raise in animal. The fact that maybe the main objective of our societies should be to preserve life on this planet, not, you know, making money, not having economical growth, but just how do we preserve life, defend life on this planet? If we're looking at the world on this way, and if we assume that this is the main objective of our society, that would change everything. That would change the way we live, the way we build cities, the way we do industry, the way we organize, you know, the territories with the rest of the living world. And that is a great perspective to me. I mean, we are creative, you know, people. We are a creative species, so we need to create, and we have a great opportunity to create something really new right now.
How do you feel about, you know, the importance of films to change people's mentality, or, you know, to taking us into this journey like you did with Animal? How do you feel about it?
To me, films and series and stories in a large way have a huge impact on the way we look at the world. I mean, if you think about some periods of history where, for example, at the end of World War II, how American cinema just shaped the way we see the world and spread the American way of life all around the world. I mean, we started to want to have jeans and to eat burgers and to drink Coke and to have cars, and just because, you know, there were so many movies, so many TV shows where how heroes, in a way, the people we were identifying to were doing that. And right now we need to have not the American way of life, but more the ecological way of life. And cinema can help us to imagine how it would be. To me, it's really hard to think that we are going to create a brand new world if we are not able to imagine it first. And cinema and novels, in a way, are, to me, the best way to start imagining that. I mean, we started to have books and movies where people would go on the moon a long time before we did. And right now we need to do the same thing with, having great cities with trees everywhere and maybe riding bikes instead of driving cars, and I don't know, so many different things that we can we can have in really strong and powerful stories that could shape our vision of the world.
Esse foi Cyril Dion conversando com a gente sobre Animal. Fique ligado na programação da Mostra Ecofalante 2022, ainda vem muita coisa boa por aí.